Full spoilers ahead. Hey, welcome to the channel. Bit of a guest today. Hopefully it's not too much of a distraction. Best Served Cold, our lovely little revenge story set in the First Law universe. Completed a reread recently last week, which I enjoyed. I don't think I really had a diminished time from my original read, but I don't perhaps think I love it in the same way. I think I have completely different takeaways, and I respect that Abercrombie gave me a lot to think about on this reread. Immediately, the thought stuck out to me, like, why aren't more standalones like Best Served Cold, The Heroes, Red Country, not written, like, why aren't they written more often? You know, expansions within worlds, like, following maybe less notable or like even notable figures like Koska or Vitari. I know there's examples of shared worlds through standalones, but it feels like there's not a whole lot quite like Best Served Cold's interactions with the First Law. I think there's perhaps something missing in the genre a little bit. Obviously, Best Served Cold is a revenge story, and it really got me thinking, like, do we, the audience, actually like the revenge aspect, the vengeance, however you want to call it? Or do we actually just enjoy how the motivation is really crystal clear? This person has wronged me, I will make them pay. Best Served Cold is simple. This action occurs, these 7 people must die. Obviously there's like more complications, but that's like the gist of it. Do we enjoy revenge? Yeah, I'm not really sure. Events are more personal and we're close to the ground, but we often forget like the larger picture involved. Taking a step back to focus on various subplots, everything becomes a bit more murkier. From Shank to everyone vying for the crown of Styria, characters playing at politics, betrayals, hidden plans, and like unknown agendas. We expand further beyond as this is part of the Union and Gurkish hostilities, and bringing that to the battlefield of Styria. I think all of that requires like more attention and reading between the lines. If you're just focused on like the initial premise and the revenge story, and I find this personally where my attention was drawn to on this reread. And like I found it more engrossing than just Monza's revenge story. But if we were to focus deeper on Monza's task, maybe not on her task, but on revenge itself, like, it's not the only revenge story within the novel. But plenty of tendrils extend from each, like, murder that is completed, and, like, the cycles of revenge continue and start anew. From Orso's initial betrayal, Monza's revenge begins. And when she's gathered her crew, she influences Day to turn on Morvia, and eventually for Morvia to turn on Monza and her crew. We have, I'm going to butcher her name, but Carlo Dan Ida's life is like completely thrown into upheaval again. And we're witness to her enacting a sense of revenge using Shivers as her tool. Who Shivers himself, like, he suffers greatly. He is once positive outlook and seeking to be better is twisted and until nothing remains due to the revenge aspects and the vengeance that Monza is bringing into his life, until, you know, it's twisted until he feels the need to turn on Monza himself, continuing the cycle, and the ripples continue on and on. Note are the sequence of betrayals within 1,000 Swords. The routine ousting of generals through the captains, orchestrated by the 3 captains, I'm going to butcher their names too. We got Andish, Caesarea, and Victus. They routinely orchestrate, ousted their generals. I don't recall if Monza really ignores their involvement or not. It kind of does feel that way. Definitely more personable to Koska. Because it's like a subdued plotline, it definitely intrigued me. It's one of those plotlines which is so far in the background that very few characters are made aware, and the captains themselves sort of don't really think about it until later on, until it's their turn to meet Koska's revenge. Okay, our guest has left. It's left me with fur everywhere. There's this overall messiness to each target in the line, and each time it becomes sort of further ill-planned until it completely shatters the group to go different paths. No step is really pulled off without some form of colossal mistake. There's nothing clean. But I think it's always the interplay between the cast of characters which is always interesting. And I do feel like it's important just to focus on those characters, because it is where we often really enjoy Joe Abercrombie, is through his characters, and this cast of characters is fantastic, and the crew is very complementary to each other, and I really enjoy the connections that are spread deep through the shared histories and knowledge we've obtained through reading the first lore. I will say I'm not I'm not the biggest fan of the Poisoner characters, but I can see how a lot of other people would resonate with them. I think the characters I more resonate with through Best Served Cold is Monza Mercado, Shivers, and Koska. I think they from the main cast really what I enjoy about this novel. I think a lot of the side characters are fine, but they aren't particularly why I read the novel or enjoy the novel quite so much. The world is full of wacky figures that often have mannerisms which are highly recognizable, and often we when we're reading passages in the novel where we instantly recognize characters, like this is a Morvier chapter, this is a Koska chapter. If we go back to First Law, this is a Logan chapter, this is a Glockner chapter. They all have these little sayings. In the case of Friendly, numbers. We often see him bringing up numbers to express what's happening. 2 of 7, 6 and 1. I think Monza has a lot of these little vocal tics, mannerisms. It feels to me they're often adopted by other members of the crew. Any time she's crossing a number, crossing a name off her list, we're often reminded of Friendly. With Monza quite often brings up quotes of various notable commanders. One I've written down here is, "Never fear your enemies, but your friends, always." What makes her interesting to me is that she always adopts these other things into her personality, so it doesn't quite feel like it's just her. We see it the other way with Shivers taking on her mantra of mercy and cowardice are the same. A lot of her little mannerisms are hard to associate with just her. It comes across like we can look at her and feel like she lacks personality, but I don't know if that really matches the full picture, because we're repeatedly told through other characters and titles she has that she's a monster. She's this really negative force in the world. But I think in reality while she is brutal, single-minded, blunt, I don't think she really ever upholds that perception that she's cruel or vile or anything that the vast majority of characters say she is. Her character is something which, thinking about further on this reread was something that I really enjoyed. If we look at her time and the little glimpses of history we gain, after her father's death, we're shown like multiple notable figures become sort of a similar father figure towards her until they're like removed. In the prologue, we have Orso, who acts quite friendly. I feel like she wants a bit of his like approval and like wants to do things right by him. And like in the past, there was Koska, who I think we see moments of softness from him towards Monza, and I get the impression that perhaps their relationship is kind of father-daughter-esque. After her brother's death, we're shown like multiple men who take on a perhaps similar role to him. Both Shivers and Rojon become her like replacement confidants and lovers, and similar to her brother, the relationships are kind of problematic and abusive. And I don't think Monza really has a bit of an understanding for how to make real relationships. I think she's very dependent on others, and she lacks a bit of agency herself to truly impact the world. She was easily manipulated by her brother throughout all the past sequences. She was always used as kind of a weapon and a shield, always used to take the fall. She was always brought into her brother's schemes. She was never like a guiding force for them or influence them. She was always brought in afterward. But on the other hand, she was always made to feel in control. Like she always recognized that her brother didn't have the combat skills, was rather weak. It made her feel like she needed to protect him. I don't think she really understood until the end of the novel how much her brother used her. Throughout large portions of the novel, she deals with her suffering and pain just by reaching for the husk, for the drugs, just to take it all away. It's around like the death of Faithful, or that's maybe perhaps where changes start to happen to her and maybe more of a realization. But maybe it's not until Foskar's death that perhaps like she sees more of what like her revenge is doing to herself and those around her, and perhaps learning more about her brother lessened her grief. And even later on, when she's like understands more of what her revenge is doing, she still stands by as Shivers kills Foskar. Quick points. I don't think her like vision of herself is like reality. Like she views her scars and wounds and titles, and I don't think she sees herself as attractive. But we witness so much attention towards her. I don't think she never really like defends herself socially. I don't feel. Or maybe she does. Maybe I'm wrong. But like she's accused of so much villainy. Like much of it's like not true. But she says nothing. Like even when Shivers accuses her about her potentially incestuous relationship with Banner, she doesn't really like react. I think it's interesting. I really do enjoy Monza, and I think like her rejection of both the Union and Gurkish Empire, and like standalone, refusing aid from both of them, kind of breaking maybe a little bit of patterns from like being influenced by others or relying on others for a lot of things, and like making her own decision there. I think that's like one of my favorite moments in the book. I explained that terribly, by the way. I think on my initial read through though, Shiver's transformation from like looking just to be a better man until this becoming this monster was like the storyline that resonated strongly with me. I found it fascinating. On the reread, I was struck early on by like how isolated Shivers is within the crew compared to like many others with connections. Like his are kind of flimsy, and he only really has Monza, which I think is very reminiscent of like the ways of the North, because like it's his like chief, I guess in this case employer. Yeah, and I find like his relationship with her extremely toxic, and like he's more prized for like his killing and combat over perhaps like his loyalty, and he is used as like that replacement for her brother up until that like one moment, when he's lost his eye, and he just says that one sentence. Shivers and Monza's ideals kind of shift, like realigning to the others, you know, influenced by the other, with Monza becoming that better person that Shivers was trying to be, and Shivers just like falls, like recreating himself into the monster he's always like had inside, allowing that hatred and of his brother, his father, and like justifying that to himself. I mentioned Monster's husk issues earlier, and I think Vice plays a huge role in this novel. We witness Koska using his alcoholism as a kind of a weapon of spite. I think Abercrombie has like so many tools that he uses just to bring characters alive, without descending them into complete caricatures. This is getting a bit long, and like I do have, like everyone has negatives about books. I think can't stand the sex scenes, and I think one of the targets' deaths are kind of eh. It's like I don't know, but yeah, that's kind of a lot of what I was thinking about when I was reading the novel. I had a really enjoyable time with it. I'm looking forward to the heroes in the Age of Madness at some point. There's a lot to talk about with this novel, and I think I touched upon most of what I was feeling. I'll probably think about something while I'm editing, but I really enjoyed this one. If you've made it this far, thank you, and goodbye. My friend is over there now. Well, that's annoying.